I often tell the faculty and the students here, I wish we could have a school in which we didn't have grades, 93 or 87.
Yeah.
I wish we all could just gather around the knowledge because it was wonderful and discuss it and master it and revel in it for its own sake.
Anchored is a production of the Classic Learning Test, based in Annapolis, Maryland, reconnecting knowledge and virtue through meaningful assessments. Visit us at cltexam.com/get-started.
Welcome back to the Anchored Podcast, the official podcast from the Classic Learning Test. My name is Soren Schwab, VP of Partnerships here at CLT, and today we are joined by Mike McKenna. Mr. Mike McKenna was drawn to classical and Christian education from a nagging sense that something was missing. After earning his BA in music education and his MA in Christian school administration, Mike served as headmaster of Christian schools for more than a decade. However, he felt that prayer, Bible class, and chapel weren't quite sufficient when it came to educating our children for Christ. Once he attended a seminar on classical Christian education in Savannah, Georgia, by Dr. George Grant, the scales fell from his eyes. Once Mike realized that Christian education was meant to be more robust, more about becoming fully human in Christ than merely learning the 3 R's, there was no looking back. Grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and the heritage of our forefathers, which modern education, even much of modern Christian education, has tossed aside, were the good and necessary way to educate our children. Mike has been headmaster of classical and Christian schools since 2000. He and his wife, Christine, have 5 children, 10 grandchildren, number 10 is in utero, and they worship at Grace Bible Presbyterian Church in Sharonville, Ohio. Mike is currently the headmaster of Mars Hill Academy in Mason, Ohio, and we are so delighted to have him on the podcast today. Mike, welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Absolute honor. This is a first podcast in what's going to be a monthly series. And some of our longtime listeners and followers will probably know that CLT, in the past, we've published annual rankings highlighting the top performing schools on CLT's assessments. And I think Mars Hill has been on every single ranking in the past few years. But as we've continued to grow and kind of reevaluated, how we want to recognize our schools, we've decided to move away from a pure school rankings perspective to find other ways and maybe even better ways to celebrate the mission and the strength of our partner schools. And so we know that, and I know Mike and at Mars Hill, we know that a score is not the end-all be-all of a classical education, even though it is a part of it. But in the future, for the next foreseeable future, we're going to highlight certain schools and tell a fuller story of what makes those partner schools so special beyond their, commitment to CLT and our partnership, but also their commitment to truth, to goodness, and to beauty in education. So each month, moving forward, we will feature a K-12 partner school across our CLT journal, email newsletters, social media platforms, and our Anchored podcast, sharing stories of what makes our partner schools unique and how CLT fits in with their mission and goal. So this is a new series, Mike. I'm so delighted that you are going to be the first one to join Anchored for this new series. And I want to congratulate you for all your success at Mars Hill Academy. And as we always do on the Anchored podcast, I want to start by picking your brain a little bit on your own educational journey. I mentioned it in the bio, kind of your aha moment. Talk to us a little bit, kind of your own K-12 education, what led you to Christian education, and then that transition into classical Christian education.
Sure. Well, I went to public schools, K through 12, and then into my bachelor's degree. I didn't become a Christian until I was in college. My brother became a Christian while he was in the military, shared the gospel with me from the time I was in upper high school until college, and eventually gave my life to Christ while I was a sophomore or junior in college. So I didn't have a Christian education growing up. Went to Grace Seminary in Indiana for my master's degree. That was my first exposure to Christian education. Christian education was not something I had been raised on or thought about for a long time. When I started to teach after college, so here I am, a new Christian, and I'm teaching in a secular public school, and I'm trying to bring Christ to bear on everything I do, right? This is my new paradigm. And I'm realizing I can't do this. It's Christ is illegal here in this school system, in this school setting. I can get fired for sharing Christ openly, or saying, students, um, uh, Jesus is before all math, and in him all math consists. Let's start to learn. That would be verboten in public school setting. So I realized I had a choice to make. I didn't see myself as a missionary in the public school setting. So I began to investigate Christian education, and landed fairly quickly in a Christian school and administration. Went on to get my master's degree in Christian school administration. And then for the first decade or so of my journey, I was a headmaster of two different Christian schools. But after a while, I began to feel like we were just mimicking what was going on in public schools, yet with Bible class and with chapel once a week and prayer at the beginning of our day and so forth. None of those things bad, but I just felt that there was something missing, something lacking. It was at that point that I attended a 3-day conference um, at Independent Presbyterian Church in Savannah, Georgia, conducted by Dr. Grant. And as you said in the opening, the scales fell from my eyes. I realized this is the missing piece, right? It was like I had an epiphany. This was the missing piece, and got Doug Wilson's book and a couple of other books on classical Christian education. Started to pass them out like candy at my church and the school where I was working, hoping that everybody else would have the epiphany with me, and this would be a new direction, and we'd all be rowing in the same direction. It was a little disappointing because I was the only one that had the epiphany. And I soon found myself rowing in one direction where everybody else at the school was rowing the other direction. And due fairness to those folks, they had established a Christian school that they wanted to be this way. And here I was thinking, well, it would be a good idea if we changed it to a Christian school going in this direction. They weren't on board with that. So that's when I left in 1992 to go to a classical Christian school. I wanted to be involved in this work with people who were already committed to it, and been in classical. I'm sorry, not in 92, in 2000. In 2000. And so I've been in classical Christian schools since then, since the year 2000.
But even then, I mean, that's kind of the older generation of classical Christian schools, right? If we're thinking of them in terms of kind of the original kind of Logos and the early day Rockbridge, and right.
Yeah, that's actually where I was at Rockbridge
right.
in 2000. Yeah, and Mars Hill was one of those schools founded in the mid 90s. So yeah, we're celebrating our 30th year, as is Rockbridge, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
Pretty
Beautiful thing to
incredible.
be a part of.
And now seeing that there's actually a lot that are rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
Not just at your own school, but just across the country, and seeing kind of the thriving of classical Christian education for someone who had that epiphany so early, right? To kind of see so many hundreds of thousands, and now the families, right? Seeing that as well. Such a beautiful.
And now there are
thing.
colleges that are on board with classical Christian education and offering tracks in classical education as well. So it's really been remarkable to see the growth of the movement in the last 30 years.
Beautiful to see God's hand in all of that. So talk to us a little bit about Mars Hill. I'm a Hillsdale College graduate, and and I was friends with some folks in college that attended Mars Hill or went to Mars Hill to teach. And of course, then when I joined CLT in 2018, I'm like, oh, wow, we work with Mars Hill Academy. That is so neat. What tell us a little bit about Mars Hill and what drew you to Mars Hill Academy?
Sure. So I first became aware of Mars Hill back in 2006 when they were building this building where I'm in. A friend of mine was the headmaster at the time. We had attended an ACCS conference here in Cincinnati and came up to visit the school. And that was my first exposure to the school. I was really impressed with it back then. Fast forward to 2019, the headmaster at that time here at Mars Hill, I was doing some consulting work down in Houston, Texas, where my family was living at the time. And the headmaster here at Mars Hill asked me to come up and do some consulting with them. So I came up, spent about 2.5 days here, gave them my opinion, and flew home. And I was very impressed with the school. As a consultant, I got to take a look very carefully under the hood, if you will, and was really impressed with the school. Identified its many strengths and its couple of weaknesses, and gave the board my opinion. This is what I would do to capitalize on your strengths. This is what I would do to improve upon your weaknesses. And didn't think much more about the school. But then I got word that they were actually looking for another headmaster. The headmaster at the time was stepping down. And so I gave him a call back and said, do you think there's any point in me throwing my hat into the ring? I was looking to get back into school administration. And he said, yeah, I think you should apply for the position. So I did in 2019 and came on here in the summer of 2020 in the midst of the COVID nightmare. I don't encourage anybody to change jobs in the midst of global pandemics, but that was what the Lord had in store for us. And so I've been here since. This is my 6th year.
6th year, fantastic. And you've been obviously in classical Christian education for a few decades now. When you look at Mars Hill, and you mentioned, some of those strengths that you identified, what would you say are kind of either the unique kind of features or the strengths of Mars Hill?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I want to say, first of all, that I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, the founders of this school, and the many people who spent the first 24 years building this school before I came along. To them go all the credit for laying the great foundation and establishing the school on a very solid path. So praise God for them, for their hard work, for their blood, sweat, and tears over the years. We wouldn't be where we are without that great foundation. So those of us who have the privilege of working here today are standing on the shoulders of giants, and that's what needs to be said first and foremost. Secondly, some of the other strengths, I think, well, that foundation is one of its strengths, right? Mm-hmm. Our statement of faith is very solidly Reformed. So I think our Reformed theology gets us off in a good direction. The foundational documents, sayers, other things written about the strength of the family, the necessity of bringing every thought captive to Christ as part of a thoroughgoing Christian education. All of those things are part of the strength of Mars Hill. I think over the years, the faculty, the people who work here, I'm just amazed that I get to work with some of the people, all of the people that I do here day after day. We have a faculty here who've been here for over 20 years, very long tenured folks who love it here and have poured their lives and souls into this work. So my colleagues are part of the strength. We do, I think, a very good job of recruiting families to us who are looking for this kind of an education. So I would say that our families are also part of our strength as well, and not just our families, but as part of our families, I also mean our students. Right? We have a good group of kids here, and we're working with them as well. So our faculty, our families. Let's not lose sight of the method in which we teach. Right? We work very carefully to be conscious about what a classical and Christ-centered education looks like here on a day-to-day basis, how we integrate subjects with one another, how we coordinate between the grammar school and the upper school so that we have a consistent approach to education from beginning to end. All of those things, I think, work together to create a very strong educational model here. I will also say this, change does not come quickly to Mars Hill. Some might think that's a negative, but I look at that as a positive, particularly when you're talking about those strong foundations, right? I think the school board here at Mars Hill, which is wonderful, best school board I've ever worked with. The school board here at Mars Hill has taken great pains to ensure that the mission, it's very difficult to drift away from the mission here. And so consistency and dedication and faithfulness to the original mission of the school is also part of our strength. the close knit community we have here. I was just talking to a parent yesterday who said he was sort of expressing this as a sadness and a joy. He said, I have a closer Christian community with the people at Mars Hill than I do at my own church.
Wow.
Uh, take that for what you will, but I took it as high praise that the community here is a very close knit community. So I think those are some of the strengths. I also like to point to our core values. I think our core values are when we look for teachers, we want them to possess the four loves. A love for Christ, a love for classical education, a love for their students, a love for their subject matter. If you don't have those four loves, probably not going to be having a long-term relationship here as colleagues. Our commitment to a thoroughgoing Christ-centered education, our commitment to a thoroughgoing classical education, working out every day what it means to be that classical and Christian. Our community, as I said, is one of our core values. So I think our commitment to those things, and certainly God's mercy on us after all these years, I think are the strengths that I would point to.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. That's beautiful. And I think the intentionality, right, with which both, like you said, the foundation of the school was laid, but then also the intentionality with which it is preserved and protected.
Yeah.
And of course, you started in 2020, and you've referenced mission a few times, and I'm wondering, not just throughout COVID, right, where I think a lot of families, they probably ran away from something, but not necessarily towards what some of the classical Christian schools had to offer. Yeah. But just in general, with just today's culture, it must be really challenging to kind of preserve the mission and not drift, right? Because there's so many different kind of tensions. How do you? You mentioned the core values, but just on a kind of practical level with your leadership team, I mean, how do you avoid mission drift in the midst of all these cultural changes?
That's a great question. I think it can be anything from sort of a logistical, mundane thing. At the beginning of every board meeting, we read the mission. The board members remind themselves at the beginning of every board meeting what the mission is. When we talk about things in admin meetings, it's not uncommon for a faculty member to push back on me or one another and say, hey, the mission is this, and I don't see how that comports with the mission. And so that sort of energetic push and shove or give and take is I appreciate it. I want that sort of give and take in the admin meeting, and I'll get the same thing from teachers. Teachers will often ask me, how does this comport with the mission, or is this an example of mission drift? Now, I don't believe that every change is an example of mission drift. Right. Everything that grows and has life and is vital changes over time. And so I would never agree that a change proposed is an example of mission drift. But I think it's important to understand and ask ourselves as we propose any changes, how does this comport or further the mission or bring us more closely aligned with the mission? So those are good conversations, and I enjoy them in faculty meetings. I don't, or in admin meetings. I don't want to be surrounded by yes men and women. And so we hold one another accountable, and I think that creates a healthy environment.
I mean, what a great way to quote unquote criticize or push back if it's grounded in the very reason why we're all at the school, right? If it's grounded in the mission. It's a perfect segue, Mike, because you mentioned earlier that change is oftentimes slow, intentionally so, right? And that we only kind of, if we do make changes, it has to be enhancing or complementing the mission. Well, a few years ago, Mars Hill made the decision to change when it comes to their assessments, right, and utilize CLT. And I joined CLT kind of in the early days, and it was certainly tricky at times, right, because you're trying to convince schools that are generally slower to change and more grounded, more traditional, more conservative, to take on something new that is also steeped in tradition and old things, right? But I would love to kind of hear kind of that experience and that. I know you were already at Mars Hill when that decision was made, but
Right.
how do you see kind of something like CLT kind of support or enhance your mission and why that change was made?
Sure. Well, as you said, Soren, I wasn't here when the change was made to the CLT, but I was at another school. I was at Rockbridge when
That's right.
when we considered that, um, and so I was glad for the adoption of the CLT when I came here to Mars Hill. It comports more closely with what we're trying to accomplish, and comports more closely with what we're trying to assess of our students than, let's say, the SAT or the ACT did. So that was a change, I think, that as I spoke with people over time here at Mars Hill, that was a change that wasn't difficult to make.
Hmm.
As we looked at the other SAT and ACT tests, they seemed to be not as in line with what we were trying to accomplish and assess on the parts of our on the part of our students as the CLT was. So we were grateful that it came along. We were grateful that it was there, and it seemed like an easy change for us.
I appreciate your saying that, and I think, but it also speaks to your leadership. Um, when we decided to develop the elementary school testing all the way down to third grade,
Yeah,
your school was one of the first ones to say, hey, we would love to pilot it. Anything we can do to support it, anything, we can give feedback on the skills that are being assessed. I just felt like for, your community really, wanted to make sure that what we are building is worthy of a school like Mars Hill. And of course, that was our deep desire too. And I remember after the first year, you asked me to come and talk to your whole staff, right? I mean,
yeah.
that's not what every school does, right? It's just a test, and we're gonna do the data. But yeah, maybe you can speak a little bit to the way you have the way you lead and the way you have brought in kind of the faculty and the staff and get them all on the same page, even something that sometimes can be as unpopular as a standardized test. But I feel like the general response was very positive from your faculty.
Yeah, the response was positive. They were on board, so that made the change easier, right? When you're not trying to persuade people to go in a direction, um, and your willingness to meet with the faculty and the staff and help us understand the utility of the test assessment after the fact in a little more granular, practical level really, I think, sold the faculty on the usefulness of the test down to the third grade. What does it tell me? How do we? How does it? How can we use this? I'll be honest with you, as somebody who's been in education my entire adult career. Um, I've seen far too often the results of standardized tests received, shoved in a drawer, filed away, and that's the end of that.
Been there, done that. Yep.
That's an unfortunate reality
Yeah.
in the field of standardized testing. However, I didn't want that to be the end. So you were very gracious to come and help us understand, as I said, at a more practical and
Right.
granular level, and that just helped convince us that the CLT was the right move
Yeah.
all along.
We called it smile and file. You get the data back and you smile, play nice, and then you just file it in the drawer.
Yeah.
Um,
One
but I
other
think,
thing,
yeah.
we one of the things that was also forcing us to take a critical look at the other standardized tests was the presence of an agenda. Can I just say that? It seemed like over the years, with the SAT and the ACT test and others, there was more of an agenda that was not in keeping with our mission
Mhm.
that we saw taking place. And so, trying to find a test that didn't feel like it was assaulting our mission, our core
Yeah.
values, but was more in keeping with them. That made the adoption of the CLT all the easier,
Yeah.
and all the easier from third grade through 12th grade.
Right. Yeah, I think it's tricky, right? Because I I think there's certainly a case to be made to say, hey, standardized testing is kind of antithetical to a classical education. And I
Yeah,
think there's a good point to be made about that, right?
yeah,
But then you're also dealing with the reality, right? That standardized testing is there. It's
Yeah.
probably not going to go anywhere. And so what if the standardized test that you're using is essentially pulling you away from your mission, right? And CLT's thought was, hey, we if anything, we want to be of service to the best schools in the country, and if we can complement their mission, and not get in the way of it, right? And not
Right.
maybe put content on the test that could be compromising, especially for a
Right.
Christian school, right?
As a Christian educator, as a classical Christian educator, I recognize that I live in the 21st century. You and I have to recognize that what we call classical Christian education today looks very different from our medieval forebears, right?
Very
And
much.
that's just the fact of the matter. We live in the 21st century, not the 15th. Um, I often tell the faculty and the students here, I wish we could have a school in which we didn't have grades. 93 or 87.
Yep.
I wish we all could just gather around the knowledge because it was wonderful and discuss it and master it and revel in it for its own sake. Well, we don't live in that world. Our students need grades and we need assessments to make sure they're mastering the material. And this is the world we live in. And I think we're making the best of it that we can.
Right. I appreciate your saying that, Mike. I mean, I mentioned earlier, Mars Hill, just purely on looking at test scores, and like I said, right, the test score is not going to be the end all be all, right? And
No.
and no family is going to say, oh, we received a great class of Christian education because of our test scores, right? However, it is undeniable that Mars Hill students are very well prepared to do well on the CLT. And I think the last few years, being number one on our school rankings were proof of that. I don't want to assume, Mike, but my assumption to some extent is that you don't do test prep, right, for the CLT. It's not like you're
Never.
doing a semester of, hey, let's just make sure we get number one and we're prepping for this. So talk to us about how the education those students, especially in high school, are receiving just naturally has translated to success on the CLT.
Well, it's going to sound like I'm not answering your question, but I'll get we are in the midst of giving our students midterm exams, and our midterm exams are oral. We take every student in 10th through 12th grade and we sit down with them for an hour.
Amazing.
And just discuss what they're learning, and we evaluate them that way. And so particularly the sophomores, when they're about to undergo an oral exam with their teachers for the first time, they're white knuckled, they're gripping the arm of their chair, and they often ask me ahead of time, Mr. McKenna, how do we prepare for an oral exam when we don't know what we're going to be asked? And I always tell them that the best way to prepare for our oral exams here at Mars Hill is to be here now, to be present in class, to be engaged in the discussion, in the conversation, to read actively, to stay organized. It's just to do the things that not only students are required to do, but productive adults are required to do, and wherever God calls them, right? So what we're trying to help them to see is that the best preparation for these sorts of assessments is to be actively engaged in what you're doing now.
Yeah.
It's not a secret sauce. It's not a special recipe or anything like that. So when it comes to the CLT test, I think the same thing is my advice. How do you do well on the CLT? Be actively engaged in the things you're studying and the conversations you're having in class. And after the lesson, sit down with your teacher and at lunch and talk with them about those things and ask other questions. But that, I think, is the best preparation for oral exams here at Mars Hill, for final written exams here at Mars Hill, for the CLT, and for life. Be here now.
I don't think I've ever heard someone put it that way, and I absolutely love it. And I think and I know Jeremy, our founder, will listen to this, and when he does, I think he's just going to be so excited, because that's truly how we envision CLT would be. Not get in the way of what you're doing on day to day, but that validates what you are doing on a day to day basis, which I think College Board and AP and SAT is just not anymore.
The only preparation we make for the CLT is the technical side of things,
Yeah.
just making sure that the kids' laptops and devices speak with you guys on your side of things. And that's it. Once that's done, we don't talk about the test again until test day.
Yeah, and I've heard some stories from teachers and school administrators that oftentimes after the test, because of the rich passages that we put on the test, oftentimes the kids want to talk about. We had that passage on. It was a C.S. Lewis
Yeah.
passage, and that connected to the thing we did last year. And again, that's just a dream come true for us to kind of see that. Hey, even something as my wife sometimes says, "Come on, you work for a standardized testing company." That it can be invigorating, right, and enriching and beautiful.
Yep.
Well, Mike, I have one more question for you,
Yeah.
and that's oftentimes
I
the
might
most.
have one or two for you if I'm allowed at the end, but
Oh,
sure,
of
go
course,
ahead.
of course.
Yeah.
Well, my question for you is this, Mike. If there's one book, and that's a tough one, right? If there's one book or one text that you can point to that has been just the most impactful on your life, maybe
My
apart
life.
from scripture, right? Because I know obviously that has been a
Yeah,
huge impact on your
that's the
life.
easy Sunday
But
school one.
yeah, I'm not going to let you get away with that one. What would be a text that you would recommend to our readers and the kind of impact it had on your life?
That's like asking me which one is my favorite child. It's a difficult question. Can I give you a couple?
Two. There's a
Okay,
couple, right?
two.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
I come back to Pilgrim's Progress every couple of years.
Mm.
I read it every 2 or 3 years. It is almost like the Bible in that it's so rich. Every time I come back to Pilgrim's Progress, I understand myself better. I understand the world in which I live better. I understand the gospel better, and I'm just invigorated by that work. So I would recommend people read Pilgrim's Progress. Um, uh, and the brothers Karamazov. I found that to be one of the most challenging books I ever read, not just because of its length, but it's a challenging book, but also one of the greatest works into the human condition that I've ever read as well. So I would I would I would recommend those two: Pilgrim's Progress and The Brothers K.
Those are both absolutely fantastic. So thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. Mike, what questions do you have?
Well, you began by saying that the CLT is moving away from ranking, but I don't know that I got a full explanation of the why behind the what. Could you help me understand why CLT is changing?
Yeah. I think we heard good feedback, right? And we had schools that were certainly excited about the recognition. And it's part, of course, the reason why we wanted to feature you first, right? Because you certainly, were in a way, right, benefiting from the recognition on the school rankings. But since day one, we've also heard from a lot of schools that had concerns that felt like, you guys are these rankings are purely based on a test score,
Yeah,
and that's really not in line with classical, right? There's so much more that goes into it, and is it potentially incentivizing the wrong things, right? And that's, I think, why I asked you the question on what did you do to prepare for it, right? Because
right.
our hope and understanding was that there actually wouldn't be much change. But talking to some schools, they just felt like it potentially incentivizes the wrong things, or it recognizes the wrong things, and at the end of the day, Mike, we want to highlight schools. I think we're blessed with a platform now, right, at CLT, and highlight all the great work that our schools are doing, and we felt like maybe doing rankings and having schools quote unquote compete against one another just based on the result of a test score is not the best way to do that. So we thought deeply about that, prayed about that, and felt like moving away from the rankings, but while still kind of highlighting and using our marketing channels to make sure we can promote and put schools on a pedestal that deserves to be recognized, and therefore the new series on that.
Okay. So is this the new series of podcasts and interviews? Is that the
That's exactly
replacement?
right. So
Okay,
Mars Hill is
great.
the very first school to get
Well,
recognized in
we're honored.
January of
Thank you for that.
26. And then every month, we're going to highlight a new school, do some interviews with them, some blog posts, and who knows? Who knows? I mean, I'm dreaming big here. It might maybe we can have a monthly Catholic school feature and charter school and Christian school. And I think anything that we can do to use our channels to let families know about all the great work that is happening across the country, right? I think the thing that we hear so much, Mike, is from schools that say we feel kind of isolated. We feel a little bit insular, right? And we're surrounded by district schools. We're surrounded by folks that are, like you said, that are not rowing in the same direction. And I think sometimes, just hearing from you and what you've built at Mars Hill and how you approach things, I think the oral examination, I hope that you hear from some schools saying, hey, how can we do that? I think that's a really exciting project for us.
Great. Well, I appreciate you giving me the honor of being the first one here. Thanks for that. It's very humbling.
Absolutely. Well, you deserve that and so much more. Again, we're here with Mike McKenna, headmaster of Mars Hill Academy. Thank you so much for all you do, Mike, and thanks for taking the time today to, after carpool and before probably other end of year things, to speak with us. Appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate it. When will this air, Soren?